Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, I'm a nursing mom, so I have a lot of time sitting down, taking care of the little one. She's doing well, alhamdulillah. Thank you for everybody who makes protection to us for her and who has shared kind words about the recent addition to my expanding family. I was watching the Prince Harry and Meghan series on Netflix. I really found it quite interesting in like episode 1 and 2. Mind you, all I've ever heard about these people, these royals, is negativity. And I do believe many people downvoted the series, and I heard a lot of bad reviews about it, so my curiosity was piqued, and it's not really my forte, but I said, let me see what's going on. I'm not really, as an American, we make fun of the royals, where we don't like redcoats, we don't like a monarchy, you know, the whole history of America rebelling against King George III. It's like a cultural thing that I think when you grow up in America, you're very different than the British. But I wanted to see what is this all about, because I know that the tabloids are pretty insane. And are people hating on this woman for no reason, or what can we know? It's pretty weird. And I just got curious, what do UK Muslims think about it? Because they live in a monarchy, has the parliament or whatever, but it's still very much part of the culture there. So I was watching it, and something that interested me was the element of paparazzi, the people who follow the royals around everywhere and get pretty invasive in their life. And Prince Harry was saying how the paparazzi would chase women away from him, where he would warn them, it's pretty intense. Once the media gets a hold of you, they follow you and stalk you around. And Meghan described how her neighbors actually put in a live stream camera in their backyard to constantly film her. And I found this to be interesting because it appears that there's a culture in England of tabloids that seems similar to America, but seems far more aggressive and mean in the UK. And they publish anything and everything, whether it's true or not, which is quite troubling. And there was a clip in there of Princess Diana, who I think she is such a classy woman. Every time she talks, it's like soothing. She's so classy. I really think Princess Diana was just a very classy woman. When she talks, it's like butter on bread. I have a lot of respect for her, just because she carries herself with such dignity. It's very unique, very British. So she was at a ski resort with her kids, and a paparazzi kept being there. And Princess Diana went up to them and said, we're on holiday, can you stop? And this paparazzi person was like, well, can we just get one picture and we'll be out of your way? And like, they were not listening, and you could hear her frustration as the parent of these disrespectful media people constantly bombarding them with pictures and being nosy into their lives. And there was a moment where I thought, well, you're a royal, so you kind of signed up for it. But at the same time, I felt pity for them. And then I started realizing how a lot of people wish to be quite famous, but then they don't recognize the fact that the media and the paparazzi, they are constantly trying to destroy your character and your life. And so I was thinking about how the differences of the UK media versus the American media. American media, like for politics, publishes a lot of fake news, but then it appears that the UK media is more about like gossip, tabloidy stuff that's super aggressive, with like juicy stories of gossip and whatnot. And so I began to think about how so many smart people said that the media is the enemy of the people because of all the fake things they publish and how they manipulate the minds of the masses, and why there needs to be a free press. And I kind of got to thinking about how it really is like a burden upon the people who are put in the spotlight and the immense amount of pressure and how it tries to crack them. How even if you're telling the truth, there'll always be somebody there who is trying to destroy you or misrepresent you or spreading just blatant lies about you for money, and how you have to go about dealing with that on a personal level. And so when we have the youth today being encouraged to do inappropriate forms of income, such as, OnlyFans and whatnot, I begin to recognize how if those girls became super famous, they'd have very aggressive stalkers. And even when there's people who are political activists, they get heavily stalked, or people who do dawah, they get heavily stalked. And so I began to think about how we must find courage and steadfastness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that having a higher power, not just faith within yourself, but having a higher power, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to guide you through such a thing is good. And it was interesting because as I was watching, Meghan and Harry, it seems like obviously she has the upper hand in the relationship, right? But what is also strange is that you would think everyone would want to marry a prince because of the luxury. But I began to realize, your whole life becomes a TV show for everyone else. And your life's never going to be the same. I think it's interesting because when you look at the Disney imagery around a prince and a princess, it's usually luxury, relaxation. You don't really get the negative side of it. And so even though these two people might be very pompous, I think they show the negative side of being a royal, which is something you're not going to get in a Disney film, right? Even though some would argue Cinderella and whatnot, and Sleeping Beauty, you name it, they have a negative side of the story where your enemy wants to destroy you. Or the Little Mermaid, Ariel, right, with Ursula, that there'll always be a witch there trying to destroy you and snatch your legacy and turn you against your family. So Disney does have villains, but I don't think it represents the media aspect of it. How the constant spotlight on you, like just a very intense gaze, like the Tower of Saruman upon you, can get really foreboding and depressive. And so trying to maintain a marriage under such conditions must be difficult for both of them. Further, it kind of just goes to show that even if you're rich and famous, you're still going to have very unique struggles that the average person may not be able to understand. So I started thinking about the niqab, the hijab, the burqa, the jilbab, and how it protects Muslim women from the evilness that comes from a very intense gaze upon you. How it cuts off some of the judgmental elements of the vanity. Because when you look at Meghan and people are being mean to her, it's almost like the female gaze wants to find an imperfection in her about her nose or whatever, to feel like she was unworthy to get a prince, or to feel like you want her to be destroyed and whatnot. And I can't imagine that type of gaze being upon you around the clock, and how that must feel. And so the decadence attracts all kinds of views upon you. And for me, I think that the niqab, letting you go about in a sort of anonymous fashion, saves you a lot of error. And also the hijab, if you wear loose garments and whatnot, covers you so that you are revealing less that someone can judge you by. They'll find something else to judge you by. But I just found it to be a sort of protection that is very wise, in my opinion. And I can see why the Prophet, peace be upon him, had his wives be covered. because they would have had natural intrigue where people wanted to follow them, see what they're doing, trying to find some imperfection, trying to stalk them, or who knows, become their friend for, nefarious reasons and whatnot, just to gossip and spread fake news or you name it. And so having that sort of veilness is a barrier from the evil gaze. And I just think about how these royals, they have all types of intense pressure upon them, and all their imperfections are constantly being stared at, pointed out, mocked, and ridiculed. And it must be quite difficult to maintain that stressful fake smile all the time. I couldn't imagine having to stand there and just pretend to be perfect all the time. Your postures, everything, the intensity of it must be quite exhausting. And so that was something I found interesting about the Harry and Meghan episode 1 and 2. If I find any more of those episodes interesting, I'll do a couple more. But the paparazzi element is interesting, and how they were not able to escape. As soon as they go outside, there's cameras that swarm them, and having that constant clicking and clacking and flashing must be quite pestering. I don't know how I would deal with it. It just reminds me of Britney Spears and Michael Jackson when they would go out, and how people would go nuts in America, and how they would lament such people constantly. And then it also gets into the psychology, I think, of people who want to be a paparazzi and how they make money from it and why do they do what they do. It's quite scary. And that also got me thinking about Kanye West and how the tabloids in America tried to drive him insane. And now he wants to troll them by saying the most outlandish things in order to stir up and confuse the media and get free publicity. And then you think about how Trump exposed the media in a certain way where anything he did and said they covered. So they gave him free publicity, but then they went so far as to constantly talk about him as just as much as the UK media talks about Harry and Meghan. And it just goes to show what the media tends to focus on: intrigue and the rich, the elites. Doesn't really cover the average problems and what we could do if we covered more of the problems of society, and how we as Muslims can make sure we participate in what is good, not what is bad, and to be careful what we ask Allah for, because if you ask Allah for such a thing, it may turn out to be quite insane, such as fame and whatnot. But it is quite fascinating. Really made me think. I'm thankful that I don't have people following me around how Harry and Meghan have them, being followed around, stalkers and people constantly wanting to spy on you. It's very strange. Very strange. Another thing is weird is that they met through Instagram or something like that. Weird. Such a simple app. But let me know what you think. I just wanted to share my thoughts. Maybe you've already seen the series, maybe you know more about it, or you're from the UK, so you have a very unique perspective on the ground of what people are thinking. But in American media, they mocked them when they came to America, and they were like, no American tax dollar should go to fund any royal, and if they need money, they better go get that money from the UK. So I found that to be quite interesting, because the British people fund the lifestyle of the royal family. We in America fund much of the lifestyle of our stupid politicians. So I thought it was quite funny when they were complaining about the royals coming because they were foreigners and they wanted to make sure that their security and luxury was not being footed, the bill that is, by the American taxpayer. So I found that to be quite funny. Let me know what you think. This is an American thing about the British, mind you, so I'm going to have my bias. But I do understand the culture of the UK and how they view their royal family. Let me know what you think.